G'day folks, my name is Rob and welcome back for another F1 fantasy video. In today's video, we're going through my race week preview and final thoughts ahead of the Imola Grand Prix this coming weekend. So as always, if you're new around here, please do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So we're going to get straight into all of the key deadline considerations for this week. And let's kick this off with the most newsworthy headline in the F1 fantasy game to date. After the Miami Grand Prix, it was announced that Jack Doohan would be stepping aside for Franco Colapinto in the Alpine, who joins the team after racing with Williams for 9 races last season. Now, Franco Colapinto comes in at Jack Doohan's $4.5 million price and was announced on the F1 Fantasy website a few days before the race weekend kicked off. So you can see here on screen, Franco is $4.5 million, 1% ownership already not long after going live in the game. So you can tell there's a lot of people eager to get a driver that cannot go down any lower in price in a car that's probably about 6th, 7th on the grid, probably not any slower than that, to be honest. And I think doubling up with someone like Gabriel Bortoleto at a time in the game where assets, particularly in the B tier, are not really looking to rise in price all that much after a raft of DNFs throughout the midfield in the last few races, means that Colapinto is a very attractive option. And I think not just because of the fact he's in a very competitive midfield car and is 4.5 million, cannot go down in value, but I think as well for teams that are looking to use the limitless chip in the next few weeks, it does give us another option in terms of how we structure our team. And I think particularly because meta assets for the likes of Behrman, Hadjar, for example, are not guaranteed a max price rise like they might have been a couple of race weekends ago. We've got to be very selective with how we structure our teams in the lead up to Limitless if you were to use it in Imola or Monaco or beyond. Now, I know a lot of people use the chip in Saudi Arabia and Miami to great effect. Maybe some in Miami luckier, but also unlucky in many respects that there were so many B-tier DNFs, but also were fortunate enough to bounce back from the Antonelli and Verstappen disappointment on Saturday. But I think because of how many drivers at this point in time, in the B tier especially, which become 3 or 4 components of our F1 fantasy lineup, having those drivers that won't go down in value in the lead up to using the limitless chip is something that I think is going to be very valuable. And for me, that's why I really like Colapinto. He is, to me, even better than Bortoleto, who also can't go down in value at 4.5 million. And I do think having as few drivers as possible that are at risk at dropping in price in the lead up to using a limitless chip, which, as we know, you will get the price changes of your pre-limitless team, just means it sets you up for additional budget gain, or at least budget preservation while that chip is in use. So I think for me, at least this is my point of view, I don't think there's a right answer as to the optimal time or optimal lineup when it comes to using limitless. But if my team was set up where I had at least 6 drivers likely to either rise in price or stay at their current price, then I'd think about using it. I don't think there are going to be too many options this season where we have 6 or 7 assets all likely to rise in value. I think we're going to have to kind of just accept the fact that one driver may lose value in any given weekend when we're on Limitless. And I think if you've got at least 6, even 7 assets, it's a no-brainer. I think 4 or 5, you're probably thinking about whether or not you can restructure your team to try and take advantage of price rises. And I think, look, there's still an argument to use the Limitless chip in the first half of the season where budgets are much lower than they would be in the second half. But I also think, kind of having looked at the calendar and the type of budget growth many teams are getting right now, a lot of teams are sat between 108 to 112 million in cost cap. I don't think there's really going to be too many opportunities until we get to the last 4 or 5 races of the season where we can get 2 premium drivers and 2 premium constructors. So I think, yes, the argument still stands that you're better off using it in the first half of the season. But Rain Fantasy has talked about this a little bit on his channel, and that you might actually be able to stretch to like a Hungary sometime after the mid-season break, where there is a track with low overtakes. And that's why Budapest stands out to me, maybe even Silverstone, as opposed to being so fixated on Imola and Monaco. And I know I've fallen into that trap myself lately, but I still think there is certainly an argument to use it at these two upcoming low overtake tracks. Now, speaking of $4.5 million assets, Kik constructor, Kik Sauber, they dropped to $4.5 million after Miami, and there have been quite a few people in the F1 fantasy community discussing the idea of this particular asset. And I think a lot of that has perhaps dovetailed into the fact that there are drivers in the B tier that are not likely to go up in price, where we've got this constructor at $4.5 million, where in actual fact, it can't really go down in value unless it scores less than a -2. And I'm going to bring up on screen here the budget builder from F1 Fantasy Tools. If you want a 50% discount off your first month of using F1 Fantasy Tools, enter Hub50. Details of that and how to access the F1 Fantasy Tools premium features are in the description below. My discount code and all you need to know about accessing the Patreon and what you get out of that it's about $5 a month. It's very cheap, and it's a nice way of giving back to the F1 Fantasy Tools guys as well, who developed this so we can use it every single race week. So Kik, -2 points for a $0.6 million price rise. I think on face value, that doesn't look too bad, but I would like to direct us over to the statistics, the historical statistics for this team. Kik Sauber are averaging 2 points per race over the last 6 races in F1 Fantasy. Their highest score this season has been 12, and they haven't scored double digits more than twice this season. I think, yes, you're looking at a constructor that is a bargain basement price, and you can get an almost guaranteed $0.5 million increase. But you are running the gauntlet with this team. It's an extremely unreliable outfit, back of the pack, so very low upside. I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, I guess you're not expecting them to score a lot of points, but I wouldn't be surprised if they struggle even to get -2. All it takes is Hulkenberg and Bortoleto to make it into Q2, drop a bunch of positions, and they're already out of the money in terms of a max price rise. So that's kind of why I'm not super excited about it. The 9 points also inflated by the fact that they had a 5-second fast pit stop. And I just think for me, like, that's pretty much going to be propping up the Kik Sauber score most race weekends. If you really wanted to go for a B tier constructor, I should say, with a chance of a decent price rise, I'd be looking at Williams. Yes, they're 10-11 million more than Kik Sauber, but we've seen how far the Williams car has come, particularly in the last few races. Sainz and Albon look very good. Albon's on a lot of people's watch lists this weekend, so I definitely think they're definitely my preferred asset if you're weighing up B tier constructors right now. I just wouldn't be going near Kik Sauber. Yes, Williams is not an A tier constructor, and A tier constructors have been the name of the game in F1 Fantasy for as long as I can remember. You always start your teams with the foundation of 2 premium constructors and build from there. I just don't think that changes anytime soon. Yes, Kik have a bargain basement discount or bargain basement price, doesn't need much for a rise, but I wouldn't be looking there. I'd be looking at Williams, or honestly, even Aston Martin at this point, to be honest. So yeah, for me, not worth it. Look, I'm not going to tell you how to play your own game, but I think there are better routes to getting a price rise and points than the back market Kik Sauber team. In terms of other constructors, who really is the second best premium constructor in the game right now? We seem to have rubber banding outcomes every single race weekend between Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's a right answer to it. I think you can make the argument for all three. It's very easy to apply recency bias. I myself do that a lot. And it's particularly when you've got practice, 2 transfers a week, lots of information to lean on before getting to the deadline. It's very easy to be influenced every single race week by a different outcome or a different decision. So for me, these are the reasons I like each of them. I think Mercedes, it's objectively clear they are the most consistent from what we've seen so far this season. Ferrari, we've talked about how good they are in the pits. Not so much in Miami, and I did think they had a bit of a down weekend. Obviously, Leclerc didn't even start the sprint race, and then Max Verstappen at Red Bull, enough said. So I do think there's certainly a case for all 3 teams, and I wouldn't say right now there is a one best outcome. Yes, look, I think Mercedes, and deservedly so, are the most popular constructor. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I stick with them for another week, but I do want to kind of consider all angles here. I think the thing about Mercedes is that they are consistent. They've scored above 46 and 45 in every single race this season. Yes, they haven't DNF'd, but I do just like the fact that George Russell is the most podiumed driver. Is that even a word? Podium driver behind Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris this season. Kimi's had his moments as well, and I just think even though they're not even close to rivaling McLaren, I'm just loving what I've seen from both Mercedes drivers and the team in general this season. Red Bull, on the other hand, it's a bit of a mixed bag if I'm being honest. 60 points, the second highest constructor score in Miami. Max Verstappen, even though he didn't win the race, it has been a little bit of a stronghold for him in the last few years. And we're going to another track at Imola where Max has had an impeccable record at as well. I'm going over to BigDataF1.com, a new website that just launched recently. This is absolutely not sponsored or anything like that, but a really important and essential hub for me to digest F1 focused information. This is Max. You can choose from the drop down here, all drivers in all eras, their history at tracks and such. You can filter it along quali gaps, all-time stats, head-to-head, blah, 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 blah. I'll let you play around with it because it only came out a couple of days ago. But you can see here, Autodromo, Enzo, Edino, Ferrari. Yes, Imola has another name, but Max has won here each of the last 3 races. We didn't have the race in 2023 because it was rained out. And even though Red Bull for me isn't the best car on the grid right now, all it takes is for Max to get another pole position, which he's done on several occasions recently by far and away not the best car. At a low overtake track, I think Max could certainly pull off another pole position at Imola. Even if he doesn't win the race, he's still a podium. I think seems like a pretty decent shot for me. And that's why I think Red Bull are a decent chance of a high score or a good score in Imola. I think Yuki Tsunoda is only one race away from being inside the top 5, top 6, and he's had a bit of a mixed bag recently, but I think that's very much within reason. So I think, yeah, Red Bull certainly in the conversation. Ferrari, on the other hand, again, they've had their moments. I think at their very best, they're the second best. At their very worst, they're bordering on the 5th best car at the moment. And so for that reason, it's hard for me, even with their pit stops, to be entirely convinced that they are the team for me. But again, lots to think about heading into the deadline. So that's my 2 cents on Ferrari this time around. And I think, yeah, it is probably a nice little segue into my asset tier ranking. Talked about a lot of these drivers. I think Oscar, if you haven't got him, get him in. I wouldn't be talking much more about any other driver right now. The only driver in the hybrid era to win 3 in a row, along with Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and Nico Rosberg. So how's that for good company? I think, yeah, for that reason, McLaren, far and away the best team. Mercedes, I think, right behind them with Red Bull, Ferrari a little bit further down the pecking order. Into the B tier, I think the most subjective point of views will come out of this. I don't think this is necessarily right, but I love Franco and Gabby B for the fact they cannot drop in price, especially if you haven't used Limitless. Hadjar, I think a set and forget. I don't think he's going to continue to rise as aggressively as he has done in recent memory. He's pretty much hitting what I think is close to his price ceiling. Maybe another 0.6, 1.2 million away, but it's not going to happen anytime soon, I don't think. But he's an easy hold when you've got the likes of Behrman, Ocon, Alonso, Lawson falling in price. Albon and Stroll, let's talk about them in just a second, but I do like them. Along with Hulkenberg, I think he is, yes, in a terrible car, but he is a very reliable driver, so I like that. Everyone else for me, probably in a void for the time being, but I have got my eye on Sainz and Gasly in a race or two's time. And we've talked about the constructors, wouldn't be going near really anyone aside from Williams. So in terms of my final team thoughts for the week, a lot to get through, understandably so, with some different combinations. But my current choice, and will always be when it's a non-limitless team, is Oscar Piastri. Now, I've talked about Limitless a couple of weeks ago. Imola, I was very much set on the idea of using it there, but I had a field day with DNFs. The haters said I couldn't get DNFs. I got plenty of them. So it kind of throws Limitless in the balance a little bit. If not in Imola, probably in Monaco. I could save it for Hungary. Monaco without walls is what it's nicknamed. So maybe there. Silverstone also has a pretty low overtake rate as well. So lots of options to play with. I think I'm now leaning towards Monaco if I can at least just avoid DNFs 1 week. And I think the weather will very much dictate whether or not that can actually happen. So weather looks pretty good this weekend. Can't see it affecting any of the sessions with the deadline hitting us on Saturday, as per usual on a non-sprint weekend. So we've got the budget builder up, or the statistics on F1 Fantasy Tools up, but I will throw us over back to my team. So team selection, that was a couple weeks ago. I've forgotten all about the F1 Fantasy template at the moment, but this is more or less how my team is looking right now. Because of the fact in the budget builder on F1 Fantasy Tools, both Alonso and Behrman are nowhere close to seeing any form of a price rise. They are the two casualties for me that I'm most likely going to part ways with. Ollie's done a decent length of time in my team. Honestly, great service from the British driver. So I think with a Mercedes constructor, I could get to this lineup, and I like Albon. I said I'd get to him in just a second, in 2 moves. I've got 1.9 million I can play around with, which I'm not against the idea of doing. But I think Albon, for me, between him and Stroll, I much prefer the Tide driver. Why do I say that? Because yes, Lance Stroll on the budget builder only needs 1 point for any price rise. That's achievable. 9 points? Perhaps not. And yes, he's had his moments, but all of his best drives this season have been on sprint weekends or in the wet weather. Imola is neither of those things. He's a terrible qualifier, doesn't have great racecraft. If he goes out in Q1, he is not going anywhere close to the top 15, in my opinion. So I think there's probably been some discourse, and understandably so, around Lance Stroll. 4 is 0.2, but I'm not playing fantasy to settle. I'm playing fantasy for the most, and I'm going to gamble that someone like Alex Albon has a much better chance of getting the max rise with 18 points than Stroll does with 9. So for me, that's kind of why I'm leaning towards Alex Albon. Williams have looked great this season. He's the best scoring, or the highest scoring driver aside from the drivers in the top 4 teams. 80 points across 6 weekends is impeccable production. So very happy to bring him in this week. That leaves me with 1.9 to play around with. If I went down the route of not owning Hadjar, again, 7 points, not impossible. I'd be very okay with holding Hadjar for 1 more week, but I don't think that's going to be for much longer. If I didn't go down Hadjar, I could bring in Nico Hülkenberg. Now, yes, he's a Sauber. He'll trundle around at the back of the field, but he is consistent. I will give him that. The 5 points you're probably playing for, to be honest, but even that feels like a little bit of a stretch for him. Certainly Hadjar got more Q3 appearances. The car is certainly better. I'd probably stick with Isaac, but if not, I could also go down the Hülkenberg route. Now, if I reset my team, I don't want to refresh the screen because it always seems to wig out when I do, and mix up the constructor. I talked about Red Bull Racing, Max Verstappen at Imola, a great history there. Again, not sure quite what we're going to expect from Red Bull. They can be the second, they can be the 4th fastest team on the grid. But if I choose to go down that route, and I love them for a differential, they're very low owned comparatively speaking to the other premium constructors, 10%. I think you're getting a lot of fantasy upside price and points wise with Red Bull. That would leave me with 17.5. Can I get to Alex Albon? I can, but not quite enough for me to get to Franco. Most of you guys watching this probably have more budget than this geezer talking to you right now. So for that reason, if I can get my filters right, I would probably think about going down the Colapinto route. Again, if I can't do that, then do I throw in Franco? Look, Lance Stroll, yes, I'm not saying I'm a fan of him, but this lineup could also work with 2.9. You could also upgrade Hadjar to someone. I'm not really that high on Pierre Gasly until that DNF drops off. Hülkenberg, I don't love it, but I could do that. And then where does that leave me with Ferrari? Probably... at this point, I'm just chopping up transfers. I do have 3, I will say, so I have a little bit more leniency with my team structure. But again, I really want Albon. I just don't think I can afford him in my team. So it would probably once again be a Lance Stroll. You could probably throw Ocon in the mix there if you like the look of him. Again, this kind of all roads leads back to Hadjar and Hülkenberg. So I'd obviously already have... Hadjar in my team here, and Stroll, it could be anyone. Stroll, Ocon, again, back on the budget builder. I don't know Ocon. I don't know if he can get 13 at a low overtake track. Has have had much better results at high overtake tracks this season. So, yeah, maybe it's Stroll. but he's due a DNF. I know he's due a DNF. I'm just not so sure I'm that convinced on him. So right now, my head is firmly sat with a lineup of most likely, unless we see any changes in the lead up to the deadline, otherwise, probably Hulkenberg in favor of Hadjar. So that's going to be it for now, guys. Much longer video than usual. I know I do try and like to keep these under 20 minutes, but it has been a minute since we last debriefed on F1 Fantasy. But I will be back hopefully with a deadline stream. Not so sure yet, but I will post on the community tab on YouTube and on Twitter if that moves forward, or an update generally speaking on my team at least. So stay tuned to see whether or not I am streaming live 2 hours before the deadline. But otherwise, let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on your team for this weekend is. And if not, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all very soon.